So, what does it actually mean to wait for the end of the world? I mean, for centuries, this one question has sparked so much fear, fascination, and let's be honest, a ton of confusion. Today, we're going to break down a sermon that tackles this head on, using a letter from the Bible to offer a pretty surprising roadmap for navigating the end times. But first, why are we so captivated by this stuff? Seriously, from ancient prophecies to the latest Hollywood blockbuster, the end of the world is something we just can't get enough of. It's the source of both deep fascination and, yeah, a little bit of anxiety. It's a timeless human question, and it turns out it's the exact same one the early Christians in a place called Thessalonica were wrestling with thousands of years ago. And that quote really gets to the heart of the issue, doesn't it? The sermon points out that throughout history, we've seen countless interpretations. Some of them are insightful, and some are just plain bizarre. All this creates a whole lot of confusion, just like it did for the Thessalonians. They were actually hearing these crazy rumors that they'd already missed Jesus' return. Imagine that. Okay, so to cut through all that noise, we're going to follow the sermon's 5-part roadmap. We'll look at how to wait, we'll unpack a pretty intense 2-part prophecy, we'll see the ultimate victory, understand where a believer's security comes from, and then, finally, figure out how any of this applies to our lives right now. So let's jump right into part 1, waiting for the end. How are we supposed to handle all the uncertainty and, frankly, the misinformation that's out there? Well, the first piece of advice is super direct. Don't get swept up in all the panic. The sermon warns against those really detailed prophetic timelines. You know, the ones with the huge charts and graphs. It even calls out specific books that sold millions of copies before their predictions, well, completely failed. The core message is simple. Be really wary of anyone who claims they've got God's personal schedule all figured out. So if panic is out, then what's in? The alternative is this kind of balanced mindset. You need to be ready at any moment, sure, but the text says don't be quickly shaken in mind. The call is for a steady, clear-headed long-term perspective. The speaker reminds us that in the Bible, when the word soon is used, it could mean a short time, a long time, or a very, very long time. All right, on to part 2. While no one knows the exact day or hour, the sermon explains that, according to this passage, 2 major events have to happen first. And this is where things get really prophetic. So what are these 2 events? According to this interpretation of 2 Thessalonians, first we should expect to see a great rebellion, which is also called the apostasy, and that's followed by the appearance of a figure called the man of lawlessness. So what in the world is this apostasy? Well, it's not just a minor disagreement or some people changing their minds. It's described as a massive, deliberate, large-scale turning away from the Christian faith. The sermon even floats the idea that modern trends towards secularization could be a sign of this very thing taking place. And the second sign, that's the arrival of this man of lawlessness, who you've probably heard called the Antichrist. This figure is described as someone who actively opposes God, creates a whole system that goes against God's law, and then, get this, ultimately sits in God's temple and declares that he is God. And that leads us to the dramatic turning point of the whole prophecy. Right after setting up this incredibly powerful antagonist, the sermon pivots to focus on the definitive, absolute authority of Christ. It's a real shift. And to really understand the scale of this victory, you have to appreciate the opponent. The sermon is crystal clear. This lawless one isn't just some charismatic leader. He shows up with the full power and deception of Satan himself. So yeah, the stakes could not possibly be higher. But after all that buildup, the end of this incredibly powerful figure is described as, well, almost effortless. The prophecy says Jesus doesn't even engage in a long battle. He just shows up, and with the breath of his mouth, it's over. The victory is presented as total, absolute, and not even a contest. So, with that huge cosmic drama as the backdrop, the sermon pivots from grand prophecy to something deeply personal: security. I mean, how can anyone feel secure if all of that stuff is unfolding? Well, the answer, according to the sermon, lies in 5 key pillars. And what's absolutely crucial here is that all 5 of these pillars are actions performed by God, not by us. The sermon's point is that a Christian's security isn't based on how hard they try or what they do. It's based on being chosen, loved, set apart, given faith, and called to glory, all by God.
The speaker just boils it all down to this really stark and incredibly memorable contrast. He says, while it might feel like the world's going to pot, God's message is that the Christians are going to glory. This simple little comparison just perfectly captures the sermon's message of hope right in the middle of chaos.
Okay, so we get to the most crucial point. What do you do with all this information? The final section of the sermon gives really actionable advice for how a believer should live their life right now in light of all these future events. And the instructions are broken down into 3 pretty clear commands. First, stand firm and hold fast to the core teachings of the gospel. Don't run, don't waver. Second, depend on grace, recognizing that your strength comes from God, not from yourself. And third, be comforted and stable. And that word comfort, that's where things get really, really fascinating. See, the sermon does this amazing deep dive into the word comfort, tracing it all the way back to its Latin roots, which literally mean to strengthen completely. So this isn't about a soft pillow or a gentle pat on the back. It's about being made strong, like a fortress, with the fortitude to withstand a full-on attack. Then the sermon brings this whole idea home with a striking modern metaphor you're not going to forget. The speaker explains that another word used here is actually the root of our word steroid. The idea is that God's grace acts like spiritual steroids, not for vanity, but to bulk us up spiritually for the challenges that are ahead. So the ultimate takeaway here is this. The Christian life, especially when you're thinking about waiting for the end, isn't meant to be some passive holding pattern. It's all about being actively strengthened, fortified, and prepared for the journey, ready for whatever comes your way. And all of that leaves us with a really powerful question to think about. If we reframe comfort not as simple relief, but as a spiritual fortress, a source of profound strength, how might that completely change the way we face uncertainty in our own lives? It's a challenging thought and a pretty compelling way to rethink what it really means to wait. Thanks for tuning in.